Are you trying to lose weight? And are you confused? Should I do low fat? Should I do high fat but no carbs and high protein? Should I try that new thing where they develop a special just for you precision nutrition? Should I do a program like that? Should I do Weight Watchers? How do I lose weight and keep it off? We have an obesity epidemic in the United States right now and in other places in the world too. How do we know what's best for us? Well, today you are in for a treat, shipmates. We've been part of a weight loss book club reading Food Intelligence, and today is the last chapter, chapter 13, called Now You Know. And as a special guest, we have with us today one of the two authors of Food Intelligence, Kevin Hall, PhD. Yay! And we get to ask him a lot of important questions. And what else is exciting? Not every author will go on a YouTube channel and say, yeah, let's just make it live. And any of your shipmates out there, they can ask questions and I'll answer it because that's what we're doing today. Kevin is very brave, but I will tell you, I have the kindest YouTube community ever. All of my shipmates and anchor moments, they are just fantastic. And I even have a couple of special shipmates who are free moderators who volunteer their time. And we've given them special permission that they can play whack-a-mole with the troll if one comes by. So we're a very safe place to be able to ask questions and find out what it was like creating Food Intelligence and what Kevin Hall's best takeaways were then and anything new he has learned now. So here we have Kevin Hall. Yay!
Thanks for having me.
All You are so welcome, Kevin. And first question, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for anybody who hasn't read your book yet?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Canadian originally. I did all of my sort of undergraduate and high school and all that sort of PhD training in Canada. Moved to the US back in, I guess it was 1997 or so. So quite a long time ago. So probably spent more of my life in the US than in Canada. Yeah, it's just been sort of training in science and physics in particular. Went to work for a little biotech company in California back in the late 90s during that sort of internet bubble, and was
Oh,
put in
yeah.
charge of their a little biotech company's type 2 diabetes computer simulation modeling program that they were kind of engaged with pharmaceutical companies with. So that's kind of where I really
Oh,
learned a
wow.
little bit about kind of nutrition and metabolism and endocrinology and obesity and type 2 diabetes. And it was a really fascinating time. It was a very small company. It grew. And of course, the internet bubble burst and there was some economic turmoil. I ended up leaving that company and starting a lab back in 2003 at the National Institutes of Health. And was there for a little over 21 years. Where I kind of
Wow.
continued to do sort of computer simulation modeling, and then eventually doing experiments in humans, where we would bring people in to live with us at the NIH Clinical Center for weeks and months at a time, and we would control their food intake and measure how changes in their diet affected their metabolism, and yeah, it was a really fun career there while it lasted.
It's really neat about that. And he writes about a lot of that in Food Intelligence. And
So if you
it's,
haven't read it,
yeah,
it'd be a good book to pick up.
exactly. And don't feel sad that this is the last week 13, because there's 13 chapters, and go, oh no, I missed your weight loss book club, because you can watch all the chapters on replay. So very, very easy. And then you can do it in the amount of time you do it. We're a weight loss book club for busy people. So we just do one chapter a week. And but
By the way,
everything
I'm
is
sorry.
on replay. So, and we have a playlist, a Food Intelligence playlist. So if you wanted to read, you're a faster reader, maybe you wanted to read a chapter a day, you could read a chapter and then you could watch on replay us talking about that chapter so you could feel part of a book club, and you can still write comments in the comment section and I will respond to it. So all of the books that we have done, you can do any of them at any time at your leisure. And we have done
A
a
few.
bunch of books already, but this one was really outstanding. And I just want to do a quick plug for you, Kevin. What I liked about this book the most,
What?
Kevin, all he wants to know is what's the truth. He didn't go in going, oh, I already know it's low fat and da 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 da, and that's what people should be eating. And these other diets coming out there, they're terrible. And my idea of dieting is the best, and I'm just going to do some experiments to prove it. No, he's coming in going, hey, what's the truth? There's all these gurus that are saying different things and have people that are following their particular way of doing things.
And what
And
does the science
supposedly,
say?
it's the best, but they're making money. And for me, when I see people making money doing something, it makes me wonder, is that really true? Are
Yeah,
they,
the
are they
truth
just
just
trying to
happens to
sell
be
me
what they're
something?
selling.
Yeah, exactly. But Kevin is out there to find what's the truth. What is really going on with people's bodies, which I find very fascinating reading his book. Do you have a question, quick, Jeff?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Hold on. But before we do that, I just want to mention that Gina and I are not doctors.
Nope.
Now, Kevin is a doctor. You have a doctorate in physics, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm not the kind that directly helps people, as my parents might say.
But if you really want to know about quasars and stuff,
Yeah. Right.
you're the guy?
Yeah.
Not really. No, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's funny, Jeff and I, we're married. We've been married for 35 years now. And we're very compatible, but we are in a lot of ways very opposite. I'm an extrovert, he's an introvert. What I liked about the book is I liked that you teamed up with Julia Bellas, because she is a journalist and she is fantastic at telling story. And every time you told a story in the book, that was the most interesting to me. And Jeff is very sciencey and he loves science and he lives to learn things. And so for him, all the chapters that you go deep dive into ATP and this is how metabolism works and those science super sciencey things, that was the most exciting for Jeff, and he liked that and found that the most interesting. So together we were your ideal person to read your book because we both found it highly interesting and very engaging.
That's great to
Yes.
hear.
Yeah. So I have quite a few questions. And
Sure.
if anybody here has a question and you're watching live, please put it in the comments.
I was trying to point to where they are.
And
They might
Kevin,
look a different spot on
oh,
your
that's
screen.
true. And Kevin is pretty neat. He has an unusual name on YouTube that has nothing to do with his being Kevin Hall or being a scientist. But I fortunately recognized his picture uh, in the back of the book here. I recognized his picture with the weird name that had like Toad or something in it. And he was asking these really great questions from the very first week we did this. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think that's the author of the book, is actually saw our review of his chapter and he's giving his thoughts too. So I am hoping Kevin will look through some of those comments, and maybe later, if you're watching on replay, you'll get a response to your question from either me or Jeff, who's read the book, or maybe from Kevin Hall. But it won't say Kevin Hall, it'll say something kind of different, but it's this picture, so you'll know it's Kevin, and he is giving you his exact response. And how cool is that? It's not very often you can really go one-on-one with an author, so I think that's pretty cool. So one of my questions for you, Kevin,
Oh, yeah.
is uh, well, one big question I have, now that your book is done and you've completed your book, is there another book coming? Because I want to tell you there are things I want to see you do in the next book, and I have all kinds of ideas of things that I want you to do. So has your life changed getting this book done? I know it's only been out for a few months, and are you willing to write another one?
Yeah, so great questions. Julie and I've been certainly talking about, is there something else that we can do after this? Is there like a different audience that we might be able to reach? One of the things that's been really heartening from getting the feedback from the book is to hear from both, regular folks who struggle with obesity or metabolic disease who found certain aspects really enlightening for them. But one of the I was very surprised to see a lot of health professionals, particular physicians and dietitians and folks who are in the field who really reached out and said, this, I hadn't really thought of things this way, or I didn't know the historical context the way that you presented it. And this has been really valuable in changing the way I think about,
Yeah.
metabolic disease and obesity and our food environment. So I think that there's different audiences that we might be able to kind of dig into some of these more specialized things. Even kids, I think, is something interesting. Like, what if there was an illustrated version to kind of educate kids that would really help them out, better understand their food and how their bodies use food. And that was one of the things that we were really didn't see when we started to write the book, was that most books in this sort of field are really talking about specific diets or specific kind of ideas that people have about what the real cause of your problems are, and will kind of marshal a set of facts that are maybe somewhat questionable in support of their narrative. We were really interested in kind of outlining, what is it that we know about the science? How do we know it? What's the history of that? And what's left to be discovered in the future? What do we really only have scratched the surface so far about in terms of the science, and how is it applied right now to the best practices in terms of how to think about our food environment, how it interacts with our biology, and how the struggles that people have when they try to fight this on their own, or with some sort of lifestyle intervention, or if they pick up one of these other books. Why is it that those kinds of changes that they institute only seem to work for a while, and then they don't seem to work anymore? It's that was the point of our book, right? So it's to kind of address those kinds of questions.
Exactly. And I got another thing to task you with that I think could make a
Sure.
difference. Now, Jeff and I used to be school teachers too. Jeff is recently retired. We taught elementary school, so that's so I still have a little bit of an elementary school personality, a little bit. I'm still a big kid at heart.
And I have a first grade sense of humor. So
Yeah.
that's what people tell me.
But this would be huge, Kevin. I was born in 1966, so I was a kid when Schoolhouse Rock came out, and Schoolhouse Rock was fabulous. Back when we were kids, the only cartoons you got was Saturday morning, and when Saturday morning cartoons were on, they would have these really fantastic, for you young puppies out there, they had these really fantastic commercials that would come out, and they would teach you something.
The catchy songs.
And with really catchy songs, they taught you math, they taught you science,
I know
civics.
how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah, I'm just a bill. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm only
copyright
a bill.
violation.
But I still remember, and I talked about it in one of the chapters, probably the chapter you talked about protein. It was, it would have been the protein chapter. One of those Schoolhouse Rocks was about a complete protein. And what's a complete protein? And it shared that if you ate beans, and not green beans, but legume beans, your pinto beans, black beans, that kind of bean. If you ate legume beans with rice at the same time, you had a complete protein. And I still remember that to this day. And
those commercials are just like 2 minutes, right? Or
not very
like
long.
Maybe.
I can't remember how long
They were
they were short. And they would play them in between cartoons. So they knew they had an audience of children watching. but that did stick with me. And so I know every now and again I try to create a meal for myself that doesn't have meat. Now, Jeff and I are not vegetarians. We love everybody who's willing to be a vegetarian. It's just not us. However, I do know that it is better to not always be having meat with a meal. But if I don't have meat, I got to have enough protein. So sometimes I will eat things where I'll put together some beans. And if I have a little bit of rice with it, I know it's a complete protein. I don't eat a lot of rice though, because I am a type 2 diabetic. I'm also someone who is really interested in your book because I'm coming with it from the aspect of someone with type 2 diabetes who has battled obesity for decades. And my husband, Jeff, does not have type 2 diabetes, and he has not battled obesity until recently. Most of our married life, he was very tall and very thin. I always felt like Jack Sprat could eat no fat and his wife could eat no lean, and together they'd lick their platter clean. That's an old nursery rhyme. And I always felt like that because he's, the tall and skinny, I'm short and chubby. For Halloween one year, we were even the Blues Brothers, and we wore the black hat and sunglasses and a jacket, and I looked just like John Belushi, and he looked like Dan Aykroyd. So we're pretty much opposites that way. But you had a lot in this book that helped both of us.
Great. That's good to
And
hear.
yes. But what I would like you to do is talk to whoever in the government and get us some kid cartoons out there about healthy eating. Anything you can nutrition wise, and have it be fun and colorful, cartoony, but really great. And it doesn't have to be very long, kind of like the Got Milk commercials with the milk mustache, but go back to more of that to be able to get to kids.
Yeah, and of course those probably wouldn't be on TV anymore. They'd be on YouTube, right? Or somewhere
Right.
where kids are, right? I have a 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they watch Netflix sometimes, but for the most part, they kind of get their information, and their little quick commercials are coming through YouTube and Instagram, I guess, is the other one, but they're not on Instagram yet. But yeah, it's like a campaign to kind of educate people, kids especially, about what it is to eat a healthy diet, and what are the forces that are kind of driving some of the increased rates of diet-related chronic disease, and how we can kind of perhaps re-engineer our local food environments in ways to kind of resist that.
Exactly.
Then in 50 years, the kids will be humming that tune. And we'll know
Singing
the
the
rice and
songs.
beans that go
Right,
together.
right.
Exactly. Or even like the Disney Channel. A lot of kids watch the Disney
Mhm.
Channel, and Disney's got lots of money.
Sure.
If they could
Sure.
even create, if we could inspire Disney to create some little
Anyway.
commercially kind of things that would be kind of fun for kids to watch and learn. But
Yeah.
and I figure you know more of those people than I do. So my power word of 2026 is connect. And so, so if I could, and I'm really good at connecting other people, but yeah, if you could do that for us, that'd be like amazing.
Why don't we go to the chat and look at what questions are in there? We can kind of alternate.
Okay, because I
people
do
are
still have
asking,
some more. Yeah.
people are asking questions.
Okay, we can ask. All right, we'll answer some of the questions that
Sure.
that our shipmates have, and I still have.
Yeah.
I have a list of questions I haven't hit yet too.
Sounds good.
Might be some of them in here.
Okay. Let's see. We got Denise in the house. She's watching from Mississippi. Hey, Denise. And Grant's here. He's also one of our moderators, and Miss Mindy. Woohoo! Yeah, we are excited for today's guest too. It's so exciting to have Kevin with us. Welcome, welcome. Hey, and Juanita Jones is in the house too from Wichita, Kansas. Okay, this gal here, you owe her a thank you, Kevin, because frankly, Michelle, she reached out to me. One of the very first times she reached out to me, and then we ended up becoming friends on Facebook. But we were reading the book Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael
Mhm.
Moss.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And we were just about done with it. And I wasn't sure what book we were going to read next. And she researched to find me so she could ask that we read your book. And
Wow, that's
she
nice.
knew it was coming out. We were able to buy it the first day. I mean,
Oh,
when
wow,
it was
great. Yeah.
new
That's
last
refreshing,
fall.
Michelle.
So,
Yeah, so
yeah.
thanks so
So,
much.
yeah, so she is the one. And she said, "Hi, all from Florida. Very much enjoyed the book, and it sits on my coffee table."
That's great.
Yay. Yeah, and she is the reason you're here because I wouldn't have known about your book. And let's see here if we have some more questions. And did you check your phone?
Yes, I did.
Everything's good? And we got Pam in the house. All right, here's our first question. Mindy says, "What was the most surprising thing you learned while researching this book?" Was one of my questions too, Mindy.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Gosh, there are so many surprising things. I think that, and again, this is probably one of the reasons why it was so great to kind of team up with Julia. And she's like a health journalist, right? And comes at this more from a layperson's perspective as opposed to a scientist's perspective. But I was surprised at how little people knew about metabolism, like that they didn't understand
Mhm.
that metabolism is this really fundamental process that's common to all life. In fact, that's, when NASA scientists were interested in figuring out if there's life on Mars, they're using assays that would detect some form of metabolism. It's so fundamental to life. And yet it seems like everyday folks, the only thing and the only time they ever think about their metabolism is when it's connected to body weight change, right? It's either the thing that's
Exactly.
responsible for your weight gain or why it's so difficult for you to lose weight. And
Mhm.
yeah, that was just kind of a really surprising thing to learn, that it wasn't, that this was a common thing, and it was common even among folks who are like health journalists, right? I mean, folks who are in the field, they write about health on a day-to-day basis, and yet this is a common sort of uh, thing that people just fundamentally misunderstand what it is about this fundamental process of life that's
Mhm.
so it's such the cornerstone of everything that we are and everything that we do, and yet it's just completely misunderstood by most people.
Yeah. I didn't when we started doing the deep dive in your chapter where you really describe the science of what is metabolism, and that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, ATP. My fifth grade teacher had a song for us and taught us about ATP and said, ATP gives you energy when it breaks down into ADP plus B, but that's not all.
Hey, Jane. Yes, it is.
Those don't you see it? It builds right up to ATP. That's the whole song.
Oh,
That's it. It's
Yeah,
that short.
yeah,
It's that short, but that's part of the
everybody.
cycle. Everybody sing. Yes,
All right.
Mrs. Walker, fifth grade in Prophetstown. But boy, she was something. But yeah, I didn't know all that stuff. I had you really made me have to think back to when I was in school and go, oh, I guess we kind of learned about that.
yeah, but
But
it's
you
not
really
taught
gave
in
it
the
a good
context,
dive.
right? I think the point is that it really, once you appreciate what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and what it is about the food that you're eating, and how does it become us, and how does it fuel
Yeah.
us, and it's not really taught generally in that sort of context, right? It's like this thing that's happening inside a cell, and you have to memorize all these little steps, right? Which is why you come up with songs to
Right.
kind of figure this out. And we kind of miss the big picture about, well, what is it that this process is doing? And it's just yes, it's amazingly complex and intricate, and it's evolved this way for a reason. And yeah, it's, I think, just a really fascinating thing. And when I talk to my kids about these sorts of things, I try to instill a sense of wonder and amazement in life, and how we got here, and what we do with our food, and why this is such a fundamental concept.
It makes you think after reading that chapter on metabolism, before you take a bite of something, you can ask yourself, is this going to fuel my body? Is this here to fuel my body or just fuel my fat? And when you're eating something that is doesn't have hardly any nutrition in it whatsoever, you're not really fueling your body. What I found really interesting in your book was the chapter that you wrote about that they were giving animals just plain protein, plain protein, plain fat, plain carbs that didn't have vitamins in it.
Mhm.
And the animals started dying. And that's when
Right.
they knew, wait, maybe there's more to food than just, protein and whatever.
Is that the one where they discovered the vitamins?
Yeah, when they discovered it was the
Yeah.
vitamin mania chapter. When you
Yeah.
wrote about that,
And
I was like, wow.
yeah, you should have seen how long that chapter was before we cut it down. It was one of those ones where Julia did a lot of the background research, and it was another surprising thing for me to figure out how many blind alleys scientists went down to try to figure out all of these vitamin deficiency diseases that they just had no idea were deficiency
Yeah.
diseases. They thought some of them were considered infectious diseases. Some of them were like, these toxic humors in our environment, the miasmas, and all these sorts of ideas that were prevalent at the time. And just the idea that, you could give people enough calories, enough protein, or not people, but in this case, these animal models of disease, and
Right.
they just would not thrive. They would die. And you give them a little bit of milk, right? A vanishingly small amount of milk along with these things, and all of a sudden they're better. So what is it in the milk that's either curing this disease or was missing from the other things? And those are two, it wasn't exactly clear which was happening. Was it something curative in the milk, or was it something that was missing from the other things that is in the milk? And of course, that leads us to the question of, well, what is it? What else is in food that's fundamental for our
Yeah.
health or driving chronic disease that we still don't know about? That's the nutritional dark matter chapter, right? Which is, the thousands
Right.
and thousands of things that we know are in food, many of which might have no impact on our health whatsoever and are excreted by our bodies very quickly, but some of them might, and we just don't know yet. And there's this vast open landscape of research that needs to be done to figure that out.
Yeah, like in blueberries, blueberries are supposed to be a superfood and it has antioxidants,
Antioxidants.
antioxidants in it. Well, what are these antioxidants? You don't see it on the nutrition label. It doesn't say
Right.
where they are. You just have to have faith that it's really in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. So nutrition facts panels and nutrition labels contain only a very small number. I think it's like less than 20 nutrients that are in the foods, and even the nutrients that the USDA tracks is only in the dozens, many dozens of things. And so people are trying to come up with a database of exactly what's in all of these different
DB.
foods. Yep, Food DB. Yep.
Mhm. We got another question here, and thank you everyone when you have a question to putting the cues in front of it. That's really helpful. Frankly, Michelle says, what was the biggest surprise from people after they read the book and people that reached out to you, Kevin?
Yeah, it's I don't know that anyone has said what their biggest surprise was. People have kind of expressed appreciation for us writing the book and having this all in one place that kind of goes from everything from fundamental metabolism, like we've been talking about, to why is it that we have the food system and the food environment that we have, in a broader sort of historical perspective. So people have often said that, I don't think I've ever heard someone say that they never learned anything from the book. And I'm certainly, in writing it and trying to put together this very wide scope of research that crosses many different fields, from agriculture to kind of fundamental cellular metabolism to endocrinology and obesity care, and all sorts of things that are involved in this book, in addition to obviously nutrition science. So yeah, it seems like people are maybe, I don't know that they're surprised necessarily by what they're reading, but they're definitely learning something new, which is really encouraging to see that it's having that effect.
I like that too.
I can tell you a little bit for me, Michelle, from reading the book. From the very, very beginning, in the introduction, Kevin talks about the 3,500 calorie rule. That if you just eat 500 calories less, or exercise 500 calories more each day, then every week you'll lose a pound. And after a year, you'll be down 52 pounds because you've taken away this 500 calories from what you normally do. And it's not true. It's kind of, I mean, you still, it's important to eat a little less and to exercise a little more, but it's really not exactly a 500 calorie deal. And then Kevin did the deep dive because everyone has talked about this for years, that this is the thing. It's the 3,500 calorie rule. But he even found the scientists that originally came up with a pound of fat being 3,500 calories.
You had a question related to the Biggest Loser results that you read in chapter 1 that
Oh, yeah.
links to this.
Yeah. And I wanted Kevin to talk a little bit about that. Kevin got a really fantastic opportunity to use the people that were contestants on The Biggest Loser. He got to, on season 8, he got to do experiments on those people and gather data on them. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that is really interesting.
There were surprises in that, I think.
Yeah, there was big surprises. Can you tell us about some of the surprises from The Biggest Loser?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of were trying to think creatively about, I watched this TV program and saw like these extraordinarily rapid weight losses. And it occurred to me that, there wasn't another opportunity to study people like this. And, as much of a train wreck as the television program was, it wasn't something that we could have done, like get approval for in our IRB or to do that to folks. But they were signing up to do this anyway. And the first thing that we were really interested in was, at the time, there was a lot of discussion about if you just did enough exercise, and particularly resistance exercise, to build up your muscle, that when you were losing weight and still doing that exercise, you wouldn't experience the slowdown of metabolism that people had observed for many, many decades when people just cut calories in their diet. And so that was like the original first question that we had was, is that true? And this was a group of people who clearly were doing an incredible amount of exercise and losing a lot of weight.
Oh, yeah.
So we should be able to show that, as they lost weight, their metabolism didn't slow down. And of course, that turned out to not be the case at all, that their metabolism was slowing down as much as people had ever measured in folks who'd been losing weight. But the interesting thing was that when you think about the number of calories people are burning at rest, that sort of resting metabolic rate,
Right.
One of the presumptions was that if you had the greatest slowing of metabolism, you should be losing the least amount of weight, right? Because of course, if you're burning fewer calories, you would have to be cutting even more calories from your diet or doing more exercise to make up that deficit. And it turned out to be exactly the opposite. The folks who were losing the weight the most quickly and the most weight were the ones who experienced the greatest slowing down of metabolism. And the only way we were able to kind of make sense of this, and this is, again, still just a hypothesis at this point, is that metabolism isn't in the driver's seat. It's not the thing that determines your body weight change. It's the response to whatever you're doing to actually cause that body weight change. So the folks who, were doing the most exercise and cutting the most calories from their diet, they would lose the most weight, but they would also experience the greatest slowing of metabolism in response to that. The way I sort of like to think about it is, it's like you're stretching a spring, and the slowing of metabolism is like the tension on the spring. So if you start off and you're kind of not stretching the spring, of course, you haven't lost any weight. And if you stretch it, you're pulling on it with a certain amount of tension. You can think of the length of the spring as the amount of weight that you've lost. And the more you stretch it, the greater the tension on the spring. And the metabolic slowing is like the tension on the spring, and how much you pull is the lifestyle intervention. And of course, the more lifestyle intervention, the more weight you lose, the greater the length of the spring. And that means that the more tension you have, the pullback. So that's kind of the way we like to think about metabolism now. And that also turned out to be true at 6 years, right? 6 years after they did this crazy competition, the ones who kept the most weight off still had the greatest slowing of metabolism.
Wow. Yeah. And I also saw from that chapter too that you also noticed the people who still, they weren't exercising 6 hours a day anymore, five, but the ones who still did a lot of exercise each week were more likely to have kept more of the weight off than those who didn't exercise anymore. And it was sad hearing about how for some of them they exercised so hard. Wasn't it Dan, the one who it just it hurt his knees and his ankles, and he had stress fractures and
Mhm.
things, and then it made it so he couldn't really exercise anymore because it was too painful, and then he gained his weight back.
Right, right. And yeah, it's true that, they did a lot of exercise, which again, I think is kind of busts the myth that people with obesity have obesity because they lack willpower, right? I mean, everybody saw for 7 months on each episode, each kind of season of The Biggest Loser, that these people clearly did not lack willpower, right? They had enormous
Right.
amounts of willpower. And, even 6 years later on average, people have kind of talked about The Biggest Loser folks as if they were failures, right? But if I didn't tell you how much weight they'd lost in the competition, I just said, these people engaged in this lifestyle program, and 6 years later, they're maintaining a 13% body weight loss, you'd say that's pretty darn good. That's actually as good as any other lifestyle intervention that we've had for obesity for quite some time. It's just that they had regained so much of the lost weight because what they were doing on this TV program was clearly unsustainable.
Yeah. Because you just have to spend your whole life doing
Yeah.
that, and that's it. And then we
Yeah.
just one more question about The
Yeah.
Biggest Loser too. Now that you've written your book and it's been out for a few months, have you reconnected with anybody from The Biggest Loser?
Yeah, so we've certainly had contact with Tracy, who we interviewed for the book, Danny Cahill, who we interviewed for the book, and yeah, so they've all been very supportive, and actually we didn't know at the time, but right around the time our book came out, there was that Netflix docuseries on The Biggest Loser,
Yeah,
which
I was
was
gonna
kind of
ask you that
interesting.
next.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, we weren't involved in that. I think it was kind of funny. They called our study the New York Times study. I guess that's probably where they first read about it. But but yeah, so it was yeah, it's really, I've always been really heartened by the folks that went through this, crazy competition, and the fact that they were able to contribute to science. I think that
Yeah.
they really were encouraged by that, and yeah, it's been great to kind of hear from them.
Oh, very cool. 'Cause I was curious about that, as it was interesting because I did see that Netflix special about The Biggest Loser, and we got your book the day it came out was the day that we got it. So it was kind of neat that you started in chapter one with that. It was like, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
gosh, you know?
That reminds me of another question related. Uh, Something that you could not get your IRB to approve today as an experiment on human subjects. What do we need? Do we need another Wiley kind of experiment in order to address the supplements that are listed as generally recognized as safe, but maybe they aren't?
Well, I mean, I think this is a general point that we don't make as directly as maybe we should in the book, but nutrition science in general is extremely underfunded. Um,
Mhm.
and and it's one of those things that, in the run up to the last presidential election, I was actually thinking that there would be a lot more support for nutrition science, given how many diet related chronic diseases there are in the US and how much they're costing us, both from a suffering perspective as well as from a financial perspective. And we've heard a lot of really good rhetoric from both sides of the aisle, right? I mean, we've had senators like Cory Booker as well as Bill Cassidy and Bernie Sanders talking about the dire nature of our food environment and how we have to do better for Americans. And of course, this administration talks about this all the time, but unfortunately, we have not seen any more support for nutrition research and to better understand how food affects our bodies. And it's been, of course, they could turn that around at some point, but it just seems like the rhetoric isn't matching the actions. And we really do need a huge investment to really better understand how are these supplements really working in our bodies, and the fact that they're not very well regulated in this country. What is it? It's not just in supplements, right? The things that are generally recognized as safe. There's like a huge list of almost 10,000 things in our food supply that have gone through this, what's called the generally recognized as safe loophole, where they didn't have to be tested to demonstrate safety. And there's currently, people writing petitions like David Kessler, former FDA director, asking a whole bunch of things that are currently on that list in terms of processed carbohydrates to be removed from that list, which would basically make the food companies demonstrate their safety. And of course, to do that, you'd have to do some research. And I think that the real challenge is that nutrition science is not well funded. And to the extent that it is funded, it's very little of it is coming from the federal government. And a huge chunk of it is coming from the food industry, which introduces the potential for conflicts of interest and bias.
Right. With that conflict of interest. Absolutely. And while you mentioned supplements real quick, have you ever done any research on the supplement of plain creatine?
No, we haven't. We have not done. We've only ever done one supplement, and there's a clinical trial ongoing at the NIH Clinical Center right now that we started and is ongoing since I left, on nicotinamide riboside, which is a supplement that's meant to increase NAD levels cellularly, which is another very popular idea in the longevity space. And we're interested in its interaction with a ketogenic diet, but it's a very sciencey sort of, not directly applicable sort of area of research. But it's fun science, and I think that there certainly should be more funding for research in this area, especially with these very basic questions for supplements that are being taken quite widely, and various forms of creatine are one of those for sure.
Right. Yeah. With creatine, my registered dietitian told me to ask my doctor if I could take it. And when I asked my doctor, she said, sure. And my doctor takes it. And Jeff and I have the same primary care doctor, and she takes it. And then we went to Jeff's urologist, and we had to ask because he's had bladder cancer. And so before he takes anything, he wants his doctor to know, which is important. I highly recommend that. Doctors need to know what supplements you're taking as well as what medications you're on. Because sometimes over-the-counter drugs, because sometimes there's a problem with them interacting that would be harmful for you. So you have to let them know. And so when Jeff asked his urologist, he said, yeah, Jeff can take that. He said, I'm taking creatine too. So both of our our doctors are taking creatine. But
it's definitely one of those things that's on the list of things that are very popular right now. And there's waves of interest in these various different kinds of supplements. And yeah, there is some research on creatine, and it certainly improves recovery after exercise and things like that. Whether or not it has some of the mental health effects that people have been talking about for cognition and whatnot, I think the jury's still out on that. Those are pretty weak studies that are out so far.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would ask. And all the doctors that mentioned and my registered dietitian, they don't sell creatine. And because they don't sell it, and they're like, yeah, you can get it real cheap at Costco. And they're not making any money on it, but yet they take it themselves. That I thought, that's something I wanted to ask.
At least there's not the bias involved.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But they did say, the jury's still out on it, but it seemed like it wouldn't hurt anything, and it might help. Okay. Oh, wait, did we do Michelle's?
I don't know.
Michelle's question is,
yes,
what was the biggest? Okay, we did do Michelle's, but we got one from Barb. A question from Barb: health at any cost. How did you find your niche in endocrinology?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much by accident, to be honest. I was, like I mentioned earlier, I finished my PhD in physics, and I went to join this little biotech company, and their kind of business model was to work with pharmaceutical companies to build computer simulation models of different diseases. And so they had one on, at that time, HIV, had another one on asthma. And they said to me, we want you to build a computer simulation model of type 2 diabetes. And I was like, oh, okay, what's that? I had no idea, right? And just over the next 4 years or so, just learned a lot about nutrition and metabolism and endocrinology, and kind of really fell in love with the science, essentially, and kind of stuck with it when I started my own lab at the NIH shortly thereafter.
Very cool. And I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
How can we be, uh, not contestants, but
What?
I don't know. How can we be human lab rats at NIH? Because it really did sound interesting. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that room that's like 11 foot by 11 foot that you
Hmm.
put Julia in, that had an exercise bike, a bed, a bathroom, and you brought all the food in and out, and you could read the carbon dioxide in the room to know how many calories she was burning
Hmm.
while she was breathing in that room and existing there.
Yeah.
How do
So
you become a
research.
lab
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, great question. So there are a variety of places that kind of do those kinds of experiments, and you can look on a site called clinicaltrials.gov, which is a website that tracks all of the clinical research that's occurring across the U.S. and beyond. And you can search by location, and you can find out if there's any studies that are involving healthy volunteers, or if you happen to have a specific disease, if there are studies ongoing about that disease and how it might affect, how they might have some intervention that they're interested in, or they might just be looking at the natural history of disease. But we just rely on these research volunteers to come in and spend time with us and be our kind of the human guinea pigs as part of
Yeah.
this research experience, and that's how science progresses forward. And so clinicaltrials.gov is a great place to look, and look for, you can enter some terms about your particular disease that you're interested in, or if you're a healthy volunteer, your location, and look for certain keywords of things that you'd like to have measured on yourself. So yeah.
Okay. And if you were doing the one on metabolism like Julia was doing, uh, do you get paid to be like a hamster? Little,
Yeah,
because
different places they.
it kind of reminded me of being a hamster, because
Yeah.
you had the exercise bike, and then you had food coming in and a little bed to sleep on.
Yeah. Usually there is some remuneration for people, and it can vary from a gift card to, or for a very quick sort of a few hour experiment that you might get, to when we would have people stay with us for weeks and months on end, they would get paid thousands of dollars because they were spending so much of their time and effort with us.
Yeah, that seems like it'd be kind of a fun thing to do in retirement, as a way to make a little extra money. You got the time. You're not
Yeah,
raising
true.
kids anymore. No one's going to miss you
Right.
living in that room for a couple of months,
And
And
you don't
Jeff
have to
wanted
make
to be
food either,
part of
right?
it. Yeah, because Jeff's like, that sounds great. I can lay around and read. I can play on the computer, and people just bring me food,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
got a little exercise bike. What more do you need?
that's right.
I don't remember saying that.
Oh, you were teasing me about that the other day. All right. And Barb also says, where is your curiosity leading you now? Ooh, that's a great question, Barb.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been very interested in, we've done a little bit of research on, the new class of weight loss medications, the GLP-1 receptor agonists, and their combinations, and how they interact with our food environment.
Hmm.
So there's lots of anecdotes right now about how people's tastes change and their preferences change, and a lot of studies that are looking at, how much people are spending on food and things like that. But there's not a lot of really in-depth research going on the interaction between the food environment, people's food choices, and their changing tastes and things like that during GLP-1 receptor agonists, as well as how these drugs are actually working in the brain, right? How are they actually
Yes.
interacting with our food environment to sort of reset at some new sort of lower body weight plateau that occurs after a couple of years on these drugs. Typically that's when people sort of see their sort of maximum weight loss is around the 2 year mark on average. Some people
Hmm.
earlier, some people later. But it means that the drugs are still working, right? As long as the
Right.
weight loss is plateaued and staying at that lower rate. And how does that work? What is it? what is it that's going on in our brains that are allowing that to happen? What are the signals coming from the body, and how do those signals get altered based on the composition of our diet? I think those are really interesting areas.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that because I right now am having metabolic adaptation, I think is what they call it, where I've lost 50 pounds since I took my first Manjaro shot 2 years ago. And I'm like right at 2 years. January 10th of 2024 was my first shot. And I'm on
Mm-hmm.
15 milligrams right now. But I do have a lot of metabolic adaptation. And so, even though my resting metabolism, I had that test done where you breathe into a
Mm-hmm.
thing, um, and my resting metabolism is great. It's 1,611 calories, my body at rest, not doing anything. And I exercise, a little bit every day, not
Mm-hmm.
like the Biggest Losers
Right.
exercise, but I at least do, something. And I recently started resistance training in October. So adding that to the mix. But it's been really slow. I'll go 4 or 5 months at a time where I don't lose a pound before I lose anything again.
Mm-hmm.
And I
You're
keep track of my calories. So you'd like someone like me because I have a little notebook in this and I, write down what I've eaten and how many fruits and vegetables, how much water, how much protein. And it makes it great when I give it to my dietitian because I give her lots of clues. But I've been eating less than 1,600, but at least 1,300. So I'm not starving myself, but I still have these metabolic adaptations that drive me nuts.
Yeah, I
look
mean,
for
so one of the things that's really frustrating for people, and I think this is just generally true in nutrition science, is even if you have a dietitian, a group of dietitians, so there have been studies like this where you have dietitians who are extremely trained in evaluating diets and measuring portion sizes and things like that, and you ask them to keep track with a weighed diet record over the course of a week. They will typically underestimate the number of calories they're eating. Why that happens, we still don't fully understand. So even the most meticulous folks who are trying to keep track of everything, and those doing that, by the way, is really good for folks to keep track of what kinds of foods they're eating, and it changes their behavior in and of itself. But what we know is that the calories that people end up tallying up at the end of the day, maybe because larger portions are sometimes misrepresented more than smaller portions. It's not exactly clear why, but the calories never add up. So where you might be thinking that you're eating 1,300 calories a day and you said your resting metabolic rate is 1,600, clearly that would mean that you would have to be losing weight. And as a scientist, I would say, well, what do we know in this situation? Well, we know kind of what the uncertainty in resting metabolic rate is when you measure it like you did with the breath. It's probably plus or minus a few hundred calories a day. What do we know about the uncertainty in how many calories people keep track of when they try to meticulously keep track of all the foods that they're eating? It's actually off by a heck of a lot more than that. There's actually a huge bias. Why that is, I don't think we really understand. And so I would say that
for me, I know
for the most part, it's great that this guilt. Okay.
Yeah.
It's guilt.
Using my fitness pal.
So it's really, yeah. So it might be that for some people. It might just be, I don't know what it is, but it's really interesting. And I've seen this so many times, and we'll see this with people who come into the clinical center and stay with us. They'll swear they're eating, a very small number of calories. And then when we calculate it out, it's like 1,000 calories more. It's just, people are really bad at estimating how many calories they're eating. They might be really good at estimating, I eat this many portions of fruits and vegetables and meat and dairy and fish and eggs and those types of things. But on an absolute scale, when you tally up the number of calories, it's often way underreported. And we've seen that time and time again. So I would say that it's probably not metabolic adaptation in your case, given that you're burning at rest 1,600 calories a day or so. It's probably the fact that these drugs have exerted their maximum effect at this dose. And that if you wanted to kind of do something else, you're going to have to either change something else about your lifestyle or have some other kind of medical or surgical intervention if you really wanted to lose more weight. Again, I'm not that kind of doctor. I don't give medical
Right.
advice.
Right.
But
I actually
what I
talked
would say is that
with,
I would just say that this 2-year time point is around when most people seem to reach that sort of weight plateau, and they think the drug isn't working anymore. And in fact, no, it has now balanced off with the changes in appetite that occur when people lose weight, and it has weakened that feedback system that has now allowing you to have lost that much weight in the first place. So it's the drug's still
and
working.
it keeps that weight off. Because
Exactly.
that's where I do know it's still working, because
Yeah.
I've not gained that 50 pounds back. And
Right.
anytime I've dieted before in my life, I'd lose weight and then I'd gain it all back plus another 5 pounds or whatever.
Exactly.
But the 50 pounds stays off, but
That's
it's
great.
just kind of
Yep. Yep. And you're getting a huge chunk of medical benefit from that very large amount of weight loss, right? That's a good chunk of weight
oh
loss.
yeah,
And I think that one of the challenges of treating obesity, and this is why probably I would not be a good physician, is because there's as with obesity, unlike other kind of diseases, there is a cosmetic aspect and a social aspect that is absent, right? From other kinds of diseases. No one's walking around, judging people for your high blood pressure because they can't see it, right?
right.
They don't know what your blood pressure is when you're walking around. And like we discussed in our chapter about the ode to body fat, you really can't tell how healthy a person is by looking at their outside appearance, right? But what we do
Right.
know is that when people do have, health consequences of having excess body fat, losing weight and keeping it off, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, and you can actually get a huge benefit. And so what I worry about is when people lose an amount of weight that's really good for their health, but they didn't achieve their cosmetic benefit or their goal weight that they had in their mind, and they think, oh, is it really worth it for me to kind of keep, maybe they're paying for their GLP-1s out of pocket every month. Maybe it's not worth it for me to keep doing this if I can't get to my goal weight, or maybe I shouldn't keep exercising if I didn't get the amount of weight loss that I wanted. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it.
Right. And you want to keep up with that exercise to keep that weight off, and that was something you discovered with those Biggest Losers too.
Yeah, and of course, there's
And thanks.
independent benefits of exercise beyond weight loss, right? I mean, if you don't lose a pound, the exercise is probably greatly beneficial.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, Michelle has another question, and she says, targeting kids will be so proactive, yes, to help understand the disease of obesity and potentially change the outcome. What is your hope for food in the future? Yep, I was going to ask
I
about
was
food
gonna ask that.
2.0. Yeah, that was on
Yeah,
my
yeah.
list that I haven't asked yet. That's a great question, Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that we finally invest in the kind of research that's needed, because we know we've got to change our food system anyway, right? We have to feed 10
Hmm.
billion people on this planet. We want to do it equitably, and we want to feed them food that's going to be sustainable for the planet as well as promote health. And so to do that, we're going to need a lot more research. We're going to need research across different disciplines, from agricultural scientists to, food scientists and nutrition scientists, and the folks with expertise in metabolism and endocrinology, all working together to figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we actually going to change our food system in a way that's going to make it possible for us to sustain that 10 billion people without destroying the planet in the process. So my hope is that we
Right.
could actually finally get those folks together. I would say this administration made a reasonable first step at that. They got a commission together with people from all the cabinet secretaries, got together as part of this Make America Healthy Again commission. That's
Mhm.
the opportunity to kind of get these different sectors working together. They haven't done it yet. I hope that they do it in the future.
Okay. And I did notice one new thing that they're doing. They started a drink whole milk instead of 2% and skim, and they want whole milk to be in the elementary schools again. Do you have any thoughts about whole milk?
Well, first of all, there's a huge segment of our population who are lactose intolerant, right? So we have to worry about
Yeah.
them often from,
I just thought that was odd.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. This is coming. The dietary guidelines for Americans were recently introduced, and there's a little bit of a disconnect between the science behind the dietary guidelines for Americans and what's being rolled out. And this is not a new thing. This has happened in previous dietary guidelines. The commercial interests get involved, the meat and dairy and industries get involved, and I think that they have definitely influenced at least the messaging around the dietary guidelines for Americans. And so I think I think you're right to point out, if you looked at their inverted food pyramid, you'll see, right at the top is a big steak and butter and hamburger and beef tallow and all these other kinds of things, which if you actually read the scientific report, it's not recommending a lot of that. And in fact, they have this little tiny whole grain section, and they didn't really change the whole
and
grain
it's like 3 little
recommendation
kernels
section.
of oats.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to find your plant protein sources on that inverted pyramid, but like you said, rice and beans is, I think, a little bowl in there somewhere with your complete protein. So so it's I think a lot of messaging and a lot of politics and a lot of potential commercial influence on the messaging angle of that. So I'm sure that the dairy industry is very pleased by the new marketing campaign.
Yeah, I bet they are. And we have Sandra Green in the house. Woo woo. And Sandra, she tried to get your book from the library, because I always, I tell people, oh, you can go to the library, or I have an Amazon playlist of my favorites, and then in the book section I have your book there. And Sandra waited, but whoever got it from her library really liked it and wasn't returning it.
Oh,
So
no.
she went out and she bought a copy of your book
Thank
just a
you.
couple of weeks ago to be able to catch it towards the end.
Awesome.
And she's loving it. So that's good. She says, hello,
Great.
tuning in from Minnesota. Well done on this book. So she is loving your book.
Great.
And she is definitely, and I know she is someone who bought it that's in our group. And she has a question. And her question is, are you working on another book? If so, what's the next topic? Yes, because we would definitely do your whatever your next book is. You got to let me know if it's food, nutrition, especially obesity related. We'll put it on in our next group.
Great. Yeah, no, we don't have current plans to write another book, but like I mentioned earlier, I think that, Julie and I have been chatting about, maybe targeting some of the material and making it more accessible to kids, for example. An illustrated version, somebody mentioned that some of the concepts were a little bit too complicated and would have benefited from some illustrations of the science and things like that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Okay. And I would love some things about metabolic adaptation, if you could throw a little bit of that in there, and maybe some
just so you know
experiments.
Just so you know that metabolic adaptation is the technical term for what we called metabolic slowing in the Biggest Loser chapter. So every time you see metabolic slowing, you could, if you looked at the actual scientific articles, it was called metabolic adaptation. That's the greater than expected reduction in metabolism for the amount of body weight that you've lost. So,
okay. And Manjaro Journey with Pam's in the house. Pammy here from Central California, 2 hours north of LA. Oil and gas farm area is where she's at. And she also says it's so amazing to have authors on to hear from directly too. I know, we're just so excited to have you, Kevin. And our shipmates were really excited that you were coming. And she agrees regarding metabolism. And Pam has lost 160 pounds.
Wow,
she has been at maintenance for quite a while, and she has done Manjaro. And Michelle says, you mentioned people really don't know about metabolism. What are some most surprising myths out there in reference to food intelligence?
So I guess one of the questions am interpreting that question as a myth that we tackled in food intelligence. I think that, the 3,500 calorie per pound rule is one of those, I think, that a lot of people have heard about and didn't know how wrong it can be and how stigmatizing it has actually been for people with obesity, because it has suggested that all you need to do is just make some small change and wait long enough and you'll reach your goal weight, right? And people in policy have made those kinds of assumptions too. They've said, well, if we just tax soda, that'll cut, on average people's calories from soda by, 20 calories a day, and that'll lead to this reduction in obesity prevalence or something. So yeah, I think that that's one of the myths that's been out there for a long time that has been misused over and over again. And it's, I think, one of the more important ones to debunk.
Yep, I do too. Hey, we got traveling tea in the house too. Woohoo! And Barb has a question. What are your thoughts on GLP-1s? Ooh, that's a good question. That was on my list here too that I hadn't asked yet.
Yeah. So the way I sort of view this is that, we know that obesity has a huge genetic component, right? So somewhere between, in a given food environment or a given environment in general, somewhere between 40 and 70% of the variation in people's body size is due to their genes. And those genes are typically lots of them working in combination. So it's not like just one gene that's responsible for obesity. It's more likely something like 1,000 genes all working in some way to kind of determine our body size in a given environment. And what we know about obesity as well is that the environment makes a huge difference. We've seen it in our experiments where we take people from, we present them the same number of calories and they don't contain any ultra processed foods, and they start to lose weight spontaneously. And you move those same people into a food environment where it contains ultra processed foods and they spontaneously overeat and gain weight. So the environment is somehow interacting with that biology, which has a huge number of genes that are working in tandem to kind of determine how much food we eat and how many calories we burn. And the way I sort of see it is that we've seen our food environments shift over the past 50 years and more in such a way as to increase the average body size. And some people hit the genetic lottery and didn't experience the same sort of shift in their body weight. And some people were most genetically susceptible to those changes in the food environment. And the way I see it is that the GLP-1 drugs are an incredible discovery that allow the most genetically susceptible people to have a fighting chance in the food environment that's not really supporting their health. And until we have a way to actually directly address the food environment in ways that are actually going to make it easier for people, then it's a godsend that we have these drugs and that there's different therapies and different kinds of modalities to actually help people with obesity. So that's my view. And I think that there will be more and more of these kinds of drugs on the marketplace in the next several years, and we'll eventually be able to figure out which drugs are best targeted to which people. And I think that's where a lot of the science is going to be moving, as well as how those drugs interact with our food environment itself.
And it really does make a difference what you're eating while you're on a GLP-1. We had a fun video that I think we put it on both our Anchor Moments RV and this Anchor Moments channel, where we were traveling and we stayed at a Harvest Host that was a candy store. And if you stay at a Harvest Host, these are different businesses, farms, golf courses, museums. They'll let you stay in their parking lot for free. However, the expectation is that you will spend at least $30 on anything that they sell.
We exceeded that at the candy store.
Yeah, we did exceed that $30 at the candy store. And this candy store had all the old-fashioned candies as well as new candies. They had any candy you could think of, it was there. And I used to like Smarties. They're in a little tube. And a lot of times they sell them at Halloween time. Like my kids, their Halloween tax, if I took them trick-or-treating, is they had to give me some of their Smarties. Well, I had some Smarties and I'm taking a GLP-1. Jeff knew to hide the candy because I told him, when we had the candy, I told him, go ahead and hide it because I don't
In
know
the van.
where it is in the van.
Yeah.
So it's
In the
not a
van,
lot of places to hide in the van.
right.
But he hid the candy and he fell asleep. I chose as one of my candy Smarties because there's not that many calories in them. One little tube, in a wrapper of Smarties is only 25 calories. And I got a box that had a few of those tubes in it. And I'd had four smart little things of Smarties, 100 calories worth of Smarties before Jeff fell asleep. Well, it gave me a sugar high and then it gave me a sugar low and it drove me crazy. I forgot about crazy food noise and I was like a squirrel let loose in the van. So while Jeff was sleeping, I'm going through the drawers and the cabinets because I needed to find those Smarties. And he did such a good job hiding it. I couldn't find it, but it was driving me crazy. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I haven't had food noise in over a year, but it came back with a vengeance by eating 100 calories of pure sugar. There's no fat with it. It's just pure sugar. And it drove me nuts. It was my food environment, eating them Smarties. And was not good for me. And and it derailed my GLP-1 big time. And Barb says, my own experience has been amazing. It is. I've gone from 405 pounds as a 5'1" woman to 125. It took 3 years and I'm in maintenance now for a year. 15 milligrams of Manjaro times 2 years. I am 2+ years. I am alive and my health is phenomenal. It's made such a difference for Barb.
That's
huge.
wonderful.
And she's been a guest on my show a couple of times.
That's great. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I want to put out there to my friends, to my fellow shipmates, Barb has a YouTube channel called Health at Any Cost, and she just hit the 1,000 subscribers, but she needs 4,000 watch hours for her channel to be monetized. So for all of us who are big Barb fans, because we just love her, she's been on my show 3 or 4 times now. If you can please check out her YouTube channel when you're done with this one and watch a couple of her videos to help her, that'd be great. And I know you'll love her anyway, and you'll love what she has on her show. And for anyone here, if you could give us a like or a subscribe, that'd be great, because then more people will be able to hear this wonderful interview of Kevin, because it'll let YouTube know that this is a very good video. So thank you for anyone who gives us a thumbs up. We appreciate that big time. And Grant's giving some woohoos to Barb. And Pam says, question, did I hear that you feel most of the efficacy is met by 2 years?
This is on average, right? So on average, when people go on these drugs, it seems like the plateau is sort of appearing at the sort of 2-year mark. That's similar with bariatric surgery, by the way. Bariatric surgery has the plateau around the 2-year mark, and it's actually quite different than almost every lifestyle intervention. In fact, every lifestyle intervention I'm aware of, where you actually get the plateau within the first year or so. And so one of the things that's been really interesting is to kind of unpack, well, why might that be? What is so different about bariatric surgery and some of these newer weight loss medications when that extended plateau seems to occur on average? Some people are plateauing a little earlier, some people later, but the average plateau is around that 2-year mark. And my interpretation is that there's a feedback system that's stimulating your brain to tell you how much of your appetite you should have. And we sort of were quantifying how much does that actually occur. And we described this a little bit in the book. It turns out that when people lose weight, their appetite goes up above baseline. And when you do a lifestyle intervention, and so it goes up by about 95 calories per day for every kilogram of weight that you lose. And what it turns out that that predicts a certain plateau after about a year or so. But when you plateau after about 2 years, it means that feedback system has actually been weakened. So the feedback system from your weight loss to your brain that is controlling your appetite is now actually weakened. So it allows you to lose more weight before you experience the same increase in appetite. At least that's our interpretation. And that's why the weight loss plateau is more like 2 years. If you have an even more beneficial effect of these kinds of drugs, you would expect the plateau to be even later. And ideally you'd like to get it out to like the 3-year time point, because that's what you would get if you had no huge amount of feedback control over your appetite from weight loss. So that plateau time is really telling you, at least in my interpretation of the data, that the drug is actually working and causing you to weaken the feedback control that normally would prevent you from losing weight and get you to the plateau much earlier.
Okay. So at least it's doubling your chance of losing weight, giving you 2 years to lose before you get a little stuck. And hey, we got Paula in the house, and she's here from Chile, Missouri. We love Paula.
Where's Chile?
And we got another question here. Pam says, Barb and I have had bariatric surgery. RNY 24 and 25 years ago, and both of us lost quickly after surgery and again quickly with the GLP-1 since we experienced regain after about 5 years of doing the surgery. Do you feel the combo, and I'm sure she has more coming, combo of bariatric surgery and GLP-1 is more helpful? It's just another great tool that has helped us.
Yeah, so I think that this is becoming more and more common, right? People who are going on GLP-1s after they've had bariatric surgery many years earlier and have experienced maybe a little bit of weight regain. And yeah, I think that it's definitely something that's going to be more popular, as well as maybe people who weren't as successful on their GLP-1s as their doctors would have liked, and might have to then move to bariatric surgery if that's an option for them. But yeah, the combination of those things is certainly not the first line treatment. You wouldn't necessarily do both at the same time. I don't know of anyone who's doing that right now. Again, not a physician. I'm not making any sort of recommendations, but again, it's like you're still, even with the most effective drugs that we have today, bariatric surgery, especially Roux-en-Y gastric bypass surgery, is one of the most effective and most powerful and sustained weight loss interventions that we have. The drugs are getting closer, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, and for Barb and Pam, they both lost a lot of weight when they had their bariatric surgery, and then 5 years after their bariatric surgery, they gained all their weight back. But then when they went on their GLP-1, they both are considered super responders, and they lost a lot of weight. Pam lost 160 pounds and Barb lost 280 pounds. And both ladies are at maintenance and have been at maintenance for a while now. And they're really both very happy with their GLP-1 has been working out pretty well.
Yeah, that's another really interesting thing from a research perspective, is to figure out, well, what is it that determines the people who are most responsive versus least responsive? There's some clues that maybe there's mutations in the GLP-1 receptor that might explain part of it, but I think there's still a lot to be understood there.
And Pam says, for me, I started at 313 pounds, dropped 45 pounds, then started Manjaro to get me to 147 pounds is what she weighs now. She looks fabulous. Wow. She's been a guest on my show too a few times. And Manjaro Journey with Pam also has a YouTube channel. She had skin removal surgery, and I asked her to please put all of the videos she had about that on a playlist, and she's done that. And she's not quite to her 1,000 subscribers yet. So check out Pam. She's a good friend of mine, and I think you'll be really, really pleased if you do, and watch some of her videos too. She's wonderful, super sweetheart. And she says, oh, it took me 2 years, and I've maintained for a year. So she's been on Manjaro for 3 years now, and she's been on maintenance for a year, and she lost 160 pounds.
Great.
In 2 years.
So it's kind of like what you were saying.
Yep.
Yeah. But she hit her goal weight. I haven't hit my goal weight yet. I'm still on the BMI. I'm still 34, so I still have a ways to go. I have more weight to lose. I don't want to be stuck here at 2 years. I just got to increase my exercise, I think. And Barb says, although my kids who have not had bariatric surgery, they're also super responders, which is also correct. So Barb's daughter and son both took a GLP-1, and they both, I think, lost 100 pounds or more. And her daughter also has a YouTube channel that's very, very successful. And her kids are, I think, are at maintenance. They just lost their weight really quickly with their GLP-1 and had extreme success with it.
So that might be the
One of the
genetic.
things that's
Maybe
kind
the
of,
genetic component.
yeah. One of the things that's really interesting, and again, one of the myths that we try to discuss, although very briefly in the book, is this idea that the GLP-1 medications are really just mimicking natural GLP-1. They're not. Natural GLP-1, it might have some very, very modest effect on appetite, but it is extremely modest. And in fact, it can be very easily overridden by other aspects of the food that you present to people. The kind of therapeutic dose for weight loss, it has to get up to, almost 100-fold the natural levels of GLP-1 to kind of get the sort of weight loss that we're seeing now, and it has to stick around for a long time, right? So it's the science of that's really interesting, and I think you'll hear a lot of people trying to make claims that this particular supplement increases natural GLP-1, and even if they can show that, even if they could show it increases it by like tenfold, it's still not getting to anything like the levels that these drugs are getting. And so I think a lot of people might be misled by the idea of, oh, well, I can just take, turmeric or some berberine or something like that that's going to increase GLP-1 levels. Well, even if it does, it's not getting anything like what's necessary to give rise to these drug-like effects.
Yeah, it's just been an amazing game changer for me. Even losing the 50 pounds and being able to keep it off and not think about food all the time, as long as I don't eat my Smarties.
That'd be smart.
Yeah, as long as I don't eat pure sugar candy. Oh gosh. Oh wait, I didn't read what Michelle had to say. I consider myself a subsequent responder too. She's down 126 pounds in less than 13 months. And I did have
Right.
Michelle as a guest on my show. I don't think she has her own YouTube channel, but she is a wonderful shipmate, and we just love her to pieces. And she has a really good story. She's just done fantastic on GLP-1s. And Pam says, I agree. We know that the food industries are influencing these decisions.
And they are businesses.
Yep, they're out there to make money, and they're not going to make any money if you don't think their food doesn't taste good.
And if they're competing against other food that is addictive.
Right.
Yeah.
We read about that in Salt, Sugar, Fat, that one of the big food companies on their own tried to lower some of their sodium and stuff to make it better for people, and because they kind of felt they had a conscience for a little bit there. But then the other food companies were like, yes, their food isn't as tasty. We're really going to ramp up our stuff. And then they lost money. So then they had to throw it out the door because at the end of the day, they've got investors and they're there to make money.
So that's probably why government has to really be involved at some point.
Yeah, to kind of level the playing field, I think.
That's kind of what we argue in the book in our chapter about policy and whatnot, and is that the government does need to step in to level the playing field. Otherwise, you're not. I mean, food companies are not public health organizations, right? They are businesses, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to increase profits and increase revenue. And unless everybody is treated equally by regulations and policies, then they will do what's best for their shareholders, which isn't always best for consumers.
Yep. Ding, ding, ding on that. And this whole interview with Kevin is really good that this is our chapter 13 review. Now because a lot of these things are things that he summarized a little bit for us in that last chapter, which was excellent. So thanks for that too, Kevin. And Paula says, I'm a turtle, but I'm a-okay with that. I'm a turtle right there with you, Paula. I gotcha.
Super.
Yeah, super responder.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we knew that.
And Pam says, I do feel like it has helped with portion size. Then GLP-1 to help the head hunger part, cravings and noise. Yeah. So the GLP-1 was really working great with the head, but the just having the stomach surgery was better for portion size.
Mm.
And Michelle says, Pam, it changed so much for me. Yep, that food noise is crazy. It drives you nuts. It's so nice to have it taken away. And Paula says, slow and steady weight loss still gets you to goal as long as you're consistent. Yep, so I'm still got to keep working at it, not give up, never surrender. That's one of Jeff's favorite movies.
Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest. And Paula says, 11 pounds from goal. And in our weight loss book club, we always like to celebrate each other's wins too. So that's a big win. Good job, Paula. And Barb says, you're doing great, Paula. Yay. So close. And thank you, Barb. Yep, these guys are awesome. Let's see if we can find any more questions here. And Michelle says, people who have obesity, we know are unhealthy. What people don't recognize is just because you are thin doesn't mean you are healthy. I know people this applies to. It's all about the food you put in.
Yeah, it's one of the points that we make in the chapter Ode to Body Fat, right? Which is that, we used to just think about obesity as just being large, right? Just having a lot of fat. But in fact, fat has a purpose, right? And it's the safe place to store calories. And when you don't have that, or it reaches its limit, as some people who don't have that particular tissue, then they experience many of the same worsened health outcomes that people with, severe obesity have, right? So it's really about the function and location of where you're storing your fat in your body. It's we use the analogy of the house with the cluttered rooms because the cabinets are full, right, already. And so what you need is to either make space for more cabinets, or you need to kind of get rid of the stuff that was that was stored in the wrong places, right? And I think that people often think about fat backwards in that way, right? So you have, for example, in many South Asian countries, and you have folks who, from a BMI perspective, the body mass index would not even reach the level of 30 to have obesity, and yet have all of the metabolic consequences of quite severe obesity and have very high risk of type 2 diabetes and whatnot. It's because they actually, or we hypothesize it's because they can't store as much fat in their subcutaneous fat tissue, and therefore have more of the so-called ectopic fat in their organs, which is causing these metabolic
the visceral fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that visceral fat that's so dangerous to have too much of. But you need a little bit of visceral fat to, cushion those organs too. But you don't want to have too much. And Pam says, I still have moments when I want cookies, chocolate, and ice cream. I just have to be sure I space them out and have protein and the food I need first. Absolutely. Yeah. And what did me wrong with those Smarties is I didn't have it immediately after dinner. It was hours after dinner. It was as a before we went to bed snack. Was not smart. Was not smart. And Pam says, and I have to continue working on my mindset. Yeah. And Michelle says, Pam, there's so much mental involved in obesity that it doesn't get discussed.
That's good.
That doesn't get discussed. Yeah. I definitely see how having sugar triggers the sugar cravings for sure. It really can. I am living proof of that. And Paula says, true, Michelle, my uncle was very thin and yet died early of a heart attack. I know, I always feel bad when that happens to people. And the super skinny people who get diabetes, and I think, oh man, they didn't even, what a rip. But it happens. Or get cancer and they're thin and are runners and stuff. And oh gosh. And Pam says, yay, congratulations, Barb. Those watch hours, me too. Yeah, she's getting so close. I think we can watch and let your videos and playlists run to help those watch hours. Absolutely. Actually, I did that for Barb
And you might want to watch
yesterday.
it too.
But oh yeah, her stuff's worth watching. But some of them that I've seen before, I just let run through while I was cleaning the house because I want to help Barb out here, get her close. And Pam says, I've been noticing that some people will reverse diet or titrate down for a while. And then when they titrate up, the GLP-1 seems to reactivate again. Have you heard anything about that, Kevin?
There's not in the context of GLP-1s, but there's lots of this sort of talk about hacks that people are trying that they think seem to work for them. I worry that much of these kinds of things are basically people convincing themselves and seeing correlations where there's actually no causation involved, that something else was probably driving the beneficial effect that they saw and they attribute it to something else entirely. The way to get around that, of course, is to study it using a rigorous research design, right? So I think that,
Right.
like so many things in this space, you have folks trying out lots of stuff, and they have their own personal anecdotes, and they truly believe this is the way it works and this is
Right.
what's happening. And I think that those are really interesting observations. And I guess the question is, before we really can know that, we actually do need to do some rigorous research to understand it. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if it works for you, it works for you, and that's great, and more power to you.
Yeah, I actually asked my doctor about my current stall, and I'm already on 15 milligrams of Manjaro, and she said, "Well, sometimes what they do is they'll change medications." But she said, "Geez, Gina, you're already on the best one. Like if I was on Ozempic or Wegovy, she'd move me over to
Right.
tirzepatide or Manjaro or Zepbound, but I'm
Mhm.
already on the best one." She did tell me though, when retatrutide comes out, if I'd like to try it, she would definitely
Mhm.
prescribe it for me and see if I can help get rid of my last 50. I just want to lose 50 more. I think it'd be like perfect.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to know, even from a research perspective, just because on average, for example, tirzepatide does better than semaglutide, are there some people who actually would do better on the semaglutide than the tirzepatide? Could you do a study
Really?
where you were cycling people? I don't know. I think it's an open question, right? We see that there are super responders to one drug. Well, is it there are super responders to all the drugs, or is it just the one? Or we just don't know, right? Because we don't typically design studies like that. But I think more studies will be designed like that in the future, because there's going to be so many more medications on the market, right? And
Right.
each drug company is going to want to know, who do we target it to? Who are going to be the best responders for our drug? Maybe there is a subgroup of people that would do extraordinarily well on semaglutide and don't do as well on tirzepatide, even though on average tirzepatide leads to more weight loss.
Hmm. See, hopefully one day they'll someone will pay you some money to run that study, Kevin, because I would totally uh, I would have faith in whatever you come up with as the answer. I think that would be really neat. And Pam says, "Thank you, such excellent feedback." Oh yeah. Yes, everyone is doing amazing. I did notice that I saw more changes when I got my walking in, hydration, sleep, and the food intake. When the loss slowed down along the way, that we don't have to wait until Monday to restart the next meal, and the next day is a great plan. She has autocorrects that happen sometimes. Um, I know for myself, Kevin, if I've had over 7 hours of sleep, because I weigh myself every day, first thing in the morning after I've gone to the bathroom and stuff with no clothes, that way I know exactly. And if I have had at least 7 hours of sleep, that's going to be my lowest weight of the week usually. And my best opportunities to lose weight, I have to have 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And it's really hard for me because I'm more of a 6 hour person.
Okay.
And but when I get that extra sleep, it's very, very helpful and makes a
Hmm.
difference for me, as well as, the exercise and stuff. And Michelle says, Pam, when I plateau, I start walking and exercising, and that restarted me. You know, I was thinking about that too, Michelle, and when something else that Kevin had said, I think, I can't remember if you said it on this thing or when I read it in chapter 13, I don't know. But I think if I exercise more than once during the day, because usually it's I'm like a one and done, but maybe do something where I'm doing a little something in the morning and then again something in the evening, and maybe that'll start my weight loss going again. So I'll let you guys know. I think I'm going to try to start that maybe this next week and see if I can move the scale again, because I'm tired of bouncing around the same 3 pounds. And Pam says, love that answer. Looking at all things to see what is going on and researching. Yep. That is the name of the game with Kevin. And Michelle says, we need to get studies to learn more who responds. I thought there was a test called, oh, I know what that word is, but I can't pronounce it. Can you pronounce it, Kevin, for us? It's a
I
science
think
word,
she's,
starts with a PH.
yeah. So there's a company that's called Phenomics that's trying to better understand who is responsive to different weight loss medications. And
Oh, really?
yeah, I'm not that optimistic about it, to be honest with you. I think that again, it's kind of like, I would say they're at the stage of many of the precision nutrition companies. They're a precision medicine company
Okay.
for obesity. They're probably overpromising a little bit too much at this point. That's my view anyway. It's only my view. So yeah, but I think it's definitely an active area. It's one that we need a lot more research in. I think it's too early to be marketing it to the public.
Okay. And Paula says, I actually gained 10 pounds on semaglutide. Oh no, I've done well on Manjaro though. Not sure why semaglutide didn't work for me.
Everybody's different.
And everybody is different. That's Mayor Mindy's thing. She's one of our shipmates. She always says that. And we always appreciate her too.
Thank you,
And
Mindy.
Pam says, me too, frankly, Michelle. When my weight loss slowed, I realized my water intake was only 40 ounces and I wasn't walking enough. And it helped. And Michelle said, Gina, the nutritionist, told me to exercise hours after having fruit. Fruit in the morning, exercise in the evening is what I do. Oh, okay. All right, that is all the questions we have there. Let me just look real quick for Jeff and I to see if we've got another one that someone didn't hit that we'd like to know while we got him here. Do you have one to ask?
I do.
Jeff?
I'll ask it right now. So when I was reading chapter 12, maybe you heard this already because I think I made a comment like this in that episode. Your comments about the future of food made me think about crickets as an earth-friendly, sustainable protein source. Have you heard anything about this? Oh, and I went and looked up before I wrote this question. Do they sell like cricket protein powder? And they do.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. It's definitely part of some of the things that people talk about. And in different cultures, that would be a perfectly acceptable sort of protein source. And in fact, you can go to places in the world where they sell actual insects that have been, cooked and seasoned in different ways and even recognizable as insects, and people eat them as treats. So yeah, I mean, I think that having people's it's not something that I think would be particularly successful in the U.S. right now, but it's certainly one of those things. Big Cricket, yeah, whoever's behind Big Cricket. But it is one of those interesting things. Like I don't think it made it into the book, but I was joking with Julia at one time that when we were thinking about animal agriculture and how many of the animals that we eat, they have relatively high metabolic rates because they're mammals, right? And mammals and warm-blooded creatures have relatively high metabolic rates, but reptiles do not. And so snakes, for example, they actually pack on meat a lot more efficiently than a mammal does. If we could get people interested in eating reptile meat. So along the same lines, I don't think we're going to have a lot of uptake necessarily, but the point is that that metabolism is one of the things that makes animal agriculture relatively inefficient when it comes to how many calories you have to put in terms of feed in order to get a calorie of animal protein out. It's pretty low when it comes to larger animals like cows and pork and even chickens which are the most, they're one of the better sources when it comes to that. But even then, it's still quite far removed from the most efficient, which are the plant-based proteins.
So the follow-up to that was, have you tried any cricket protein powder?
I've tried a grasshopper, like a grasshopper taco before. So yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's crunchy. It's kind of salty, and yeah, it's like, yeah.
It's
Is
okay.
that
That was
going to be your question too, right?
No,
Yeah, right.
but Paula's like, I'm not eating crickets. And Franklin just has a hashtag no crickets. I should.
I want to order some, Gina.
That's crickets.
Yeah. Anyway,
They seem open to the snakes, though. I don't know. They seem open to the snake.
We live in Arizona.
In Arizona, rattlesnake.
We have various restaurants that sell,
and it's expensive.
Is that right?
It's an expensive appetizer.
Probably not a lot of meat. You gotta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta find a way to process it, right? You gotta have like a rattlesnake processing plant that actually gets it off the bone for you. There you go. Okay.
Oh yeah. Hey, okay, so I highlighted the questions that haven't been answered yet in my 2 pages full of questions. We would love to interview sometime Julia as well. Your co-author is she super shy, or do you think she'd be willing to come on?
No, she's not shy, and we've been doing quite a few podcasts and things together. It's tricky because she is in Paris, so there's like a pretty extensive time difference. So so it's tricky to kind of get her scheduled for things, but I'll pass along that you're interested in chatting with her for sure.
Yeah, and Jeff and I, we're sort of retired. All we do is content create now. So we can be up at any time. So if you can put the word out to her and connect us with Julia, I think it'd be fun.
Convenient for her.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be on a Sunday because we'll be starting our next book next week. So so anytime would be great. And what can we do as citizens to make a difference?
Wow. Great questions. And I would think that, there's, we outline many of them in our kind of chapters on policy changes. And so that involves kind of talking to your representatives. From my perspective, being a little selfish, I would urge people to kind of request that there's more funding going towards nutrition science and nutrition research and better understanding these kinds of things, because there are so many open questions and it's so critical to the health of the country and basically the financial state of the country when it comes to Medicaid and Medicare and all the health costs that are associated with diet-related chronic disease. From a personal standpoint, I mean, I think that we have to be quite cognizant of the kinds of products that we choose to purchase, that we sort of vote with our dollars and try to choose the healthiest products if it's within our budgets, to maybe pay a little bit more for the more healthy versions of things. Because unfortunately they tend to be a little bit more expensive, right? That's part and parcel of this problem. But the more people that buy them, the more of a market that people will see, the more competition there will be in that space. And eventually we'll see prices come down potentially. And if we could get our elected officials to institute policies to actually subsidize those healthier products and perhaps even tax the unhealthiest ones and use that revenue to support the more healthy versions, then we would have a better food system.
I think those are great things.
And those were like in what chapter was? I think you talked about these in
13, but there was another chapter he mentioned it in as well.
Yeah. So this is in what's it called? It's the one where we talked about Harvey Wiley and a lot of the policy things. I think it's chapter is it 10 or I can't remember. I
Yeah.
don't have a book in front of me, but
No worries. No worries. Got your book though.
okay.
And let's see, what else was I going to say with that? That's why, like eggs. Uh, I'm not a vegetarian, though I feel bad sometimes when I'm eating my meat, going, oh, But when I do buy eggs, I buy eggs that are cage free, and that they say that they're on the package that it's done in a humane farm. But I pay more for my eggs to be able
Mhm.
to get that. Uh, and let's see, has your life changed since you published this book? I
Well,
know it's
yeah, I
just
mean,
been a few months.
I'd say that, I mean, my life has not changed so much as a result of publishing the book, other than all the podcasts and interviews that we've been doing, which has been kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of right around the time we were finishing the book was when I decided to retire from the NIH. Something we don't really talk about in the book, but right around the time we were finishing up, it turned out that the folks from Health and Human Services were interfering with the way that we communicated our research to the public. And at the same time, they were trying to get as many scientists to leave federal service as possible. And one of the things they did was lower the age of full retirement to 50 if you had 20 years of service. And so I tried to kind of get people on board to support this kind of research and had no luck, and decided to take the difficult decision to wind down my lab. And so that happened right around the time we were finishing up the book. So the biggest change has not been the book, but has been those career shifts and trying to figure out what's next, and we'll see what happens next. But yeah, that's been the biggest change, kind of coinciding with the book. But yeah.
Yeah, because it's mentioned in the last chapter that you had to have a lawyer to make sure you could get
Yeah,
the
and that
book
was a
published.
completely separate thing. That was completely separate even before we ran into these problems. There was the thing about the NIH is that they're a basic and kind of medical research organization, and they're not engaged in policy stuff. So they were not happy with the idea that we had policy recommendations in the book, and did not want me to be an author of the book. And so that's the reason I had to hire a lawyer to kind of get permission to do this. But yeah, that was the way I sort of view it, is that was the last administration. We had problems in the last administration about supporting our research as well. And so it's been a kind of a constant problem as to this sort of research has been, people talk about how important it is and how much they're interested in it, but at the end of the day, not a lot of resources go towards it.
Right. And then you've got, big food has big lobbies too. And
Yep,
so
absolutely
that's
right.
hard.
Yep.
That is hard.
You got big cricket.
Big cricket. And so that answers, do you still have your day job? That was question 14 on here.
Yeah, nope, I do not.
No, so now he does not have his day job anymore. And what is your best advice for us consumers who want to eat healthier and be healthier?
Yeah, I mean,
I think I know it.
Go ahead.
Is it eat food, mostly plants, not too much?
Yeah, it's hard to beat that that's a Michael Pollan is the creator of that phrase, right? But I think that the point is that what constitutes a healthy diet has not changed much over many, many decades. In other words, the evidence and the recommendations to eat more fruits and vegetables, to eat lots of whole grains and legumes, and kind of limit your saturated fat intake and definitely your sugar intake. And these are all sort of common things, and ideally from a minimally processed food sources, right? So avoiding ultra processed foods. These are not new concepts. And yet, and dietary guidelines have, for the most part, made those sorts of recommendations for decades and decades. We're just not very good at doing them, because eating that way, unfortunately, takes a lot of time, It takes quite a bit of skill and equipment, and takes quite a bit of expense to be able to purchase those ingredients and store them. And there are certain impediments to kind of eating in this healthy way. And we have these alternatives that are available that are so quick and easy and cheap and tasty. It's very tough, right? So for a lot of people,
Right.
that's why we have a whole chapter on policies that we will hope to kind of reverse that situation and make the more healthy alternatives the cheaper and the more convenient and delicious options.
That would be fantastic if that could be the case. And then I just have two last questions
Right.
that weren't asked by my shipmates.
There might be some more questions.
Okay, we'll check, and if you still have a question, I'll check my shipmates. That looks like there are a couple more questions came in. When Julia was trying out the precision nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
and she was doing the 2 or 3 different companies at the same time, because you had to do a little experiment on how that would go. And
We
Julie
had an argument about this.
Yeah, Jeff and I had an argument about this. Jeff thought she only had to mail her poop and blood sample once, and I thought maybe she had to mail probably multiple times, because if she's changing anything, she's eating, that maybe they would need to see multiple times. She'd have to mail her poop and blood. So I was wondering if you could.
No, it was just the one time.
That up.
It was just the one time. That's what they asked for,
Jeff was right.
and she did what they asked, right? I mean, whether or not they would have been any better or more consistent if they'd asked for more samples, I don't know the answer to that question. But yeah, she just did exactly as instructed. And and the idea is that it's weird, right? Because I think you're absolutely right, Gina, that they make a big deal about how you can change your microbiome by changing your diet.
Yeah.
And so you would think that, okay, well, just one baseline sample might not even kind of give you a real accurate picture.
Right.
And in fact, people who do microbiome research now realize that the poop sample is not even a good index of your microbiome that's happening upper in like your small intestine, right? So it's like the lower part down. And in fact, there's like, depending on the time of day that you take it, it's going to be different. And so there's so much variability. And again, the science is just not really there yet to support the kinds of things that are being marketed to the public, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was part of a study years ago at Arizona State University, and it was apples versus pear body shape. And I have a pear body shape. And they were trying to tell what was better and we had a registered dietitian. To one group, all they did, the apples and the pear body shaped people, all they did is ate better, according to what a registered dietitian told them to do. And we had our body fat done by sitting in an egg. It looked like an egg. It was a big plastic pod that we sat in, and it let us know what our body fat was. And we did a metabolism test, and they pinched our fat with clippers. They did all kinds of things, calipers. And they did it to everybody, people shaped like an apple and people shaped like a pear. But then they put a third of us where all they got was help with a registered dietitian. Another third of us got help with the dietitian, and we did aerobic exercises at ASU so they could watch how many calories were in what we were doing. And then I was in the third group, and the third group had a registered dietitian and a personal trainer that all we did was lift weights. And we couldn't even, like, when we warmed up, we could do like 7 minutes of cardio, either on an exercise bike or a treadmill, but that was it. And then the rest was lifting weights, and we weren't allowed to do exercise on our own at home. We had to just do exercise at ASU. And every time that I would come in to see them once a week, I used to have to pee in a cup. And they also did blood tests, but they checked my urine every single week. I don't know what they were looking for in there, but they were looking for something during this to see what was better for the different body types. But it was really interesting. But I knew they were checking my stuff all the time. So I thought maybe she was going to have to mail poop a lot. And Jeff's like, no, it'd just be one time. But he said, but who would want that job? What a horrible job. That's a real poopy job. Getting the mail at that lab.
Yeah, right.
All right. And then, and then one other with Julia doing a test. When she got to be your guinea pig and live in a 11 by 11 foot room, there was cameras in there watching her read books and play on the computer and ride the exercise bike. There was a bathroom in there. So was there like a door? Like, how did you do
No, there's like
that?
a
So she'd have.
curtain. There's like a curtain that you pull around for the toilet.
Okay, and then they could still get the air of her breathing and stuff.
Yes, exactly
Okay,
right.
so I was just curious about
Yep.
that because I was like, huh, I wonder how that would work, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Here,
And
Gina,
oh,
let's
look,
look
all
at
right, now we're
these.
gonna take care of our
And then if you have
buddies
any
here.
more-
All right. And Pam says, I
Okay.
hate snakes, but if I had to eat them, I guess I could do it. Ah. Hey, we got Kathleen in the house, and she says, my dietitian recommended that as a diabetic, I should drink 3.25 fat whole milk instead of lower fat milk. The small amount of additional fat is better than the fillers added to low fat milk. Does that ring any bells for you, Kevin?
I have no idea. I don't know. I haven't heard that before. I don't know.
Yeah. All I do know, Kathleen, for sure, is that I wore a Freestyle Libre sensor for years. And if I have a little bit of fat or protein with my carbs, I don't have a big spike. But if I have carbs without fat and protein, my blood sugar shoots straight up. And if you were drinking skim milk, well, there's no fat in that, versus whole milk where you have the fat, you'd probably have less of a blood sugar spike. That would be what I think maybe the reasoning is for your registered dietitian with that. But just my thoughts. And and Pam's sending us some love. Yes, I buy free range eggs too. Yay! And Paula says, Kathleen, that makes sense. Yeah. And Paula says, I do too, Pam. I just got some from a friend. I love free range eggs. Such a great interview. Very informative. Thank you. Yep. Thank you so much. And then next, and Paula says, yes, thank you, Kevin, for sharing your expertise. And everyone is thanking you. And then just one last question.
Okay.
Who's one of your mentors?
One of my mentors. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question because, I've had sort of formal mentors kind of, but I would say, really a lot of my trainees have acted somewhat like mentors to me, to be honest with you. Like I learned so much from the folks who kind of came into my lab over the years, and they all bring their own sort of background experiences. And I never really had any formal sort of mentors in this particular space, but learning from these other people who have a common interest and come in with their own experiences, and we all sort of work together to figure out, what are really cool research questions to work on. That they've really been as important as any sort of formal mentor that I've ever had, I would imagine. So it's kind of an unorthodox way to answer that question, I guess. But I think that they're the ones who've really had the most impact.
Answer.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And this has been wonderful. Thank you, said Michelle. And thanks, Michelle, for recommending that book. Michelle also recommended our next book. So the book we're going to read first chapter next week is Weightless by Rocio Salas Whalen, MD. She is an obesity doctor, an endocrinologist, and this book is her best advice that she has given patients who are taking GLP-1s.
Gina, this book is not weightless.
There is some weight to that book. So we'll be discussing chapter 1 of Weightless next week. It just came out like December 31st. So it's only been out for a couple of weeks. And frankly, Michelle was the one who recommended us to do that next book. And as soon as we're done with Weightless, we're going to do Oprah's book, Enough. And so I'm really excited to do this one too. I did not know that Oprah was going to do one around the same time as Weightless, or I might have started with the Oprah one, but I've already told everyone to do the Weightless was going to be next. So, and if you want to look for either of those books, or if you would like to look for Kevin's book, Food Intelligence, you can find all of them. Can you put our favorites on for us, Jeff? You can find all of our favorite books on favorites at amazon.com/shop/anchor moments. And you'll find all of our favorite things, including all of our favorite books. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been amazing having you. If everyone hasn't had a chance yet, please like, and would love it if you subscribe to our channel. It's always free to be a shipmate here. And Kevin, I look forward to your next book, whatever that is, or next project. Don't be a stranger. You can reach out to me anytime. It was such a pleasure meeting
Thanks,
you
guys.
today.
Thanks. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Oh, we need to see who wins, who gets to wear a crown this week. They are 3 shipmates who did ask the most questions and things according to YouTube. And YouTube says, is this it? Nope. I had it set up. Oh, shoot. I guess I didn't. Do you have it on your phone, sweetie?
No, I do not.
Dun, 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 dun. My chat view channel. Here we go. All right, let's see. Top fans right here. All right, YouTube says 3rd place today is Barb. Health at Any Cost gets to wear a crown. Yay! 2nd place, Manjaro Journey with Pam. And our number 1, oh my gosh, we needed to do this.
Is it me?
No, it's frankly Michelle who brought us to Kevin by having us do his book. Yay! And she gets to be the number 1 queen of the day. All right, everybody. Hold on to your anchor moments and make it a great day. Bye-bye.